Hey everyone, for this video I'm going to go over a few red flags and a couple things you really need to look out for when you're looking to purchase a used bike. Alright, I got some notes here, so I'm going to go down a list of things that I noticed on this ZX6R. This customer bought this bike and he brought it in after he bought it for me to look it over and just advise him on anything it needed. So I came up with a laundry list of things on this bike that he needs to get done. So kind of wanted to go over with you guys a few things you can spot when you're looking to buy a used bike. Some things of concern, some things that would really be good to know before you finalize a deal with the seller. So right off the bat, on this bike, tires pretty low, the tread's pretty thin. We're right here at the wear bar, so it needs some tires. And also I noticed there's some damage right here. Look at that gouge. So you need to look at the tires. You can look at the date code. Usually it's a 4-digit code. Right here it says 1919. That means the 19th week of 2019 these tires were made. So you can kind of get an idea of how old the tires are. And you want to stick within probably about 3 to 5 year old tires. It's a good general rule. While we're looking at the tires, we're also going to look around the edge of the rim. Notice for any bends or scratches. You can actually see on this one, it's got some gouges right here. So this bike's definitely been down, and you could tell by looking at the lip right here if there's any bends. So you want to take a real close eye on around the rim of the wheels. So we're also going to look at the back tire. This one doesn't look too bad, but we're looking at we're looking for the wear bars right here, and you could tell that it's pretty close, so that tire will need to be replaced soon. Also take a look at the rim, look around the edges, look for any dings, dents, scratches, anything obvious. Next, we're going to look at the chain sprockets. Very important because this is a highly neglected part of the bike. On this bike, you can tell there's a lot of rust. It's really loose. You can just tell it just has not been taken care of. Also, we're going to look at the sprockets and we're going to look at the teeth specifically. This sprocket looks pretty decent actually. You want to look for a flat spot right here. If these teeth are looking real pointy, then it's time for a new chain and sprockets. My advice would be to replace the chain and sprockets as a set. If you replaced a new chain and didn't do the sprockets, the old sprockets would prematurely wear out the new chain. So you might as well do it right, replace both together. So we're also going to look for leaky fork seals. So this is leaking, it's wet all along here. You can see it's kind of wet, oily all around here. So you want to look for leaky fork seals is a major maintenance item that a lot of people don't really notice. Another thing we want to look at is the brakes, the overall condition of the rotors. If they are deeply gouged or dished out, you could also measure these. Most all rotors have the thickness labeled on there somewhere if you want to use a mic and measure them. Also, we're going to look at the brake pads. Here you can see brake pad material looks pretty good. If the brake pad material is getting thinner than the actual metal backing here, that's when it's about time to replace them. One thing I would highly encourage you to do when you're looking at a bike is grab a flashlight. Anytime you're looking at a bike, day or night, you need a flashlight. You can find so much more leaking or scratches or anything weird with the bike when you got a flashlight. So that's one trick I learned. You can really spot a whole lot more when you got good lighting. So the next thing I want to talk about on this bike is the fairings. So these are aftermarket Chinese replacement fairings. And some of the ways you can tell that they're aftermarket is the fit and finish. So a lot of things just don't line up. This doesn't look good. Like it's not factory quality. This inner cowling isn't lined up very well. We're also going to keep an eye out and look around for missing fasteners, Screws, this one's coming out. Also, one indication that it's an aftermarket fairing is that the decals are clear coated over on the fairings. Most all Chinese fairings are clear coated over the decals, and most OEM Japanese fairings have painted fairings and then the decals are like a sticker on top, with exception of the fuel tank. So the fuel tank often it'll have the decal under the clear coat on the fuel tank. So another thing to look out for is, can be pretty obvious, but not always, is any sort of damage. So we got some scratches here. Let's see, we got scratches on the bar ends right here. These are replacement levers, so this has probably been replaced after an accident. Scratches on the ends of the mirrors. This one has scratches on the forks. So this bike's obviously hit the ground, and it's been repaired. Let's see, we got scratches on the tank here. Bar ends are rusted, so when painted metal parts hit the ground, get scratched up, the metal is exposed and starts rusting, so it's kind of a quick and easy indication of any damage. Also here on the exhaust pipe, there's some rash, so that's obvious. Stuff like that, you can just spend your time and look the bike over and try to get a really good feeling for the overall condition and the history of the bike. On this bike, I noticed there's a few missing hardware. This screw looks kind of stripped. See, the fairings aren't really fitting properly. These Chinese fairings are a real cheap alternative to replacing fairings with the original factory fairings, which I get because sometimes those can be thousands of dollars. So we're gonna look at the controls. We have a clutch lever here. We can see how well it moves, if it's smooth or if it grinds, if it's sloppy, that kind of stuff. We got the shifter right here, a little bit of play in it, and we can actually see that it's loose on that shaft, so that needs to be tightened. Other things we can look out for, I noticed earlier that this brake pedal was bent. You can notice it's kind of bent out. Next, we're gonna check the front brake lever. And it's squeaky, but it works. We have brake pressure. Throttle return, you wanna make sure that throttle returns without any hesitation whatsoever. You wanna make sure there's always just a little bit of play in the throttle as well. Another thing we wanna look for is any sort of leaks. So this is where the flashlight comes in real handy. And you can tell right here, it's kind of wet down there. It's got something oil leaking. Around this area on the motorcycle, it's most likely gonna be chain lube that has flung all over the place and leaking all over the place. But we wanna look for anything wet, anything dripping, that kind of stuff. Any leaks could be an indication that there's damage or that it was neglected. Next, we can take a look at the brake fluid. The brake fluid should be as clear as possible. It's almost as clear as water. So this bike has a lot of sun fading on the bottle, so it's kind of hard to tell, but you can kind of see, generally speaking, the fluid level and condition by looking at the bottles. So on the front one, it's kind of hard to see, but it doesn't look super dark and it looks like it's full, but this one's kind of hard to tell. Another thing to look out for is your fork tubes. Make sure they're not rusting and pitted. You can look for leaks, and you could also look for any kind of corrosion, especially if the bike's been parked near the ocean. Another thing you can look for is these dust covers, if they're dry rot and cracking. This one you can actually see some cracking in those dust covers. So take a real close look at those forks. You can see all the stuff built up right here. Another good idea when you're looking at a used bike is to start it and make sure it's cold when you're starting it. A lot of bikes act up when they're cold. It's kind of a good indication of the general health of the bike if it starts up and runs pretty good when it's cold. So make sure that you ask the seller or whoever's got the bike to let you do a cold start to see how well it runs cold. Next is your coolant level. Most all bikes, it's kind of hard to get to the radiator cap, but they do have overflow bottles. So there should be a little bit of fluid in your overflow bottle between the low and full marks. So that's another thing that you'll need a flashlight sometimes to see if there's a coolant in the bottle. Next, check your oil level. Most bikes have a window or a dipstick. So you can see on this bike, the oil is maybe a tiny bit low, not a big deal. But you can also look at the condition of the oil. This looks pretty black. So I would ask when the last oil change was and see what they say. It might be due for an oil change. Next, you need to check your lights. Let's see what we got on this one. This one, we have a blinding license plate light. That's probably not legal. We're gonna check your tail light. We have a tail light. We're gonna hit the rear brake. Okay, that works. And then we're also gonna hit the front brake lever. Let's see here, that works. Next, check your headlights. On some bikes, they actually need to be running for the headlights to work. So these are the spotlights. Those are working. Next, we're gonna check your headlight. So we're gonna start the bike up. Got low beam, high beam. Next, we'll check the turn signals. Some bikes have a running lights in the front. So some bikes, the turn signals actually stay on the front, and they also act as blinkers. So this bike, left works, right works, good. Let's check the back. And we got left, that works. And we got right. So just food for thought. These integrated turn signals are not legal. I believe the turn signals need to be at least 9 inches apart, out to the left, out to the right. So just a FYI. So next thing you can check for is if your cooling system is working properly. So bikes have a fan and a thermostat. What happens is that when the bike gets up to a certain temperature, let's say usually around 215, 217, right around there, the fan will kick on. The temperatures should drop a few degrees, maybe down to low 200s, and then the fan will turn off, and then the temperature will go back up, and then the fan will kick on again, and it'll cycle back and forth. So you'll know that the cooling system is working properly if you're noticing the fan kick on and turn off, and the temperature fluctuates between around the 215s to around the 200 mark. So the next thing is paperwork. Does he or she have the title? And also, is it registered? So you can notice that this one's actually been past due registration. So one thing you can do is go on the California DMV website, and they have a registration fee calculator. You could punch in the VIN number and license plate number, and it'll give you all the fees that are due at the time of ownership transfer. So these are good bits of information you need to know when you're transferring title. If the bike hasn't been registered in 2 or 3 years, the registration fees can easily add up to $500, $600, $700. So that you need to know while you're negotiating price on the bike. So another thing you can do is when you're looking at the bike, ask the seller if they would mind if you took it to a third party. If you took your bike to another mechanic, had them look it all over and let you know if there's anything they spot or anything they recommend to do. This will help give you a more informed decision on how to go about the purchase of the bike. Also, if you took it to a mechanic, they can tell you what the maintenance schedule is and if anything is due for maintenance, and that'll give you some more questions to ask the seller and kind of get an idea of what they've done, if they're up to date with all the maintenance too. So, well, I hope all these tips help you to make a wise decision when buying a used bike. Hopefully you don't find a lemon. Hopefully you get a good deal. Hopefully the transaction goes smoothly and that the seller is informative and honest. Not always the case, so you need to protect yourself by really looking the bike over. Spend your time doing it. Don't rush it. Don't go at night. I'd go during the day when there's a lot more, light, so you can see the bike a lot better. Start the bike cold, test ride it, and like I said, maybe have take it to a third party and have them look it over. Get a real good professional eye to look the bike over, and they'll hopefully spot anything on the bike that would need immediate attention. So I hope all this helps you make a wise decision when purchasing a used bike, and I wish you all the best of luck. Thanks for watching.